said, do not let others define you. You define yourself. That message, to define yourself, is the urgent message we bring to you today. One of the biggest challenges of the green movement. Oil companies attempting to rebrand themselves as environmentally friendly as their products pollute our oceans. Livestock industry claiming eco-friendly status as animal waste contaminates our rivers and streams. The clothing industry trying to rewrite the script that makes them one of the world's greatest polluters. And the fur industry claiming green eco-friendly status for their products. We know that green labels mean green dollars, and the green economy is a billion-dollar business. And as we convene here today, you can rest assured that businesses and industries are watching. They're watching to see what is said and what is done, because they are all too willing to define your movement. Executives know that they can make billions of dollars claiming green attributes for their products and services. But when we see an industry like the fur industry, an industry that combines two of the world's most polluting industries, animal agriculture and the clothing sector, start to claim that their products are eco-friendly, we know that we have reached a critical moment in your movement. The fur industry, like many industries, is more than willing to speak for you. Eco-friendly claims are flooding the internet, on billboards, glossy pages of upscale magazines, shopping centers around the world. You will see this. And designers and manufacturers are towing the party line for the fur industry as the environment continues to be under tremendous assault. Industries and businesses know that the best defense is often a good offense. And when it comes to a number of the world's most polluting industries, the green movement is their ultimate offense. So how do they do this? It's called greenwashing, when companies overstate or exaggerate what they do for the environment. So you may think I sound a little hard on businesses and industries. Am I too hard? Well, a consulting firm did a study about 5 years ago. They took a look at thousands of products that claim to be green, eco-friendly, and environmentally friendly, and they found that a staggering 98% of all products failed by greenwashing their products. Claims that are too vague, too poorly defined, like saying fur is green, making claims that have no proof, making the sin of a trade-off where they suggest a single attribute is very important, ignoring more important impacts to the environment. Claims that are not relevant, sins of the lesser of two evils, which you will find pervasively in the fur industry. They love to talk about how terrible faux fur is, and we're not here to defend faux fur. It has its issues. And of course, the final sin of fibbing. Now, this is a lot to take in. If you could just remember the word filth, that will get you where you need to be. False labels and claims, irrelevant. Lesser of two evils, too vague and no proof, and hidden trade-off. And that's what you have with today's economy. Well, the Federal Trade Commission finally stepped in 2012 and issued the Green Guidelines. We know that they were heavily influenced by this greenwashing report because they echoed many of the concerns. They said, no unqualified general statements about the environment, please. Don't state your product is green or eco-friendly. We don't know what that means, and consumers are likely to be deceived. Don't make comparative environmental marketing claims unless they are clear and substantiated. And do not overstate the environmental benefits when they are negligible. And no more unqualified biodegradable claims unless you have scientific proof and unless that item is expected to break down and return to nature within a reasonable amount of time. And what is that? The FTC says 1 year. Now, how many have seen fur manufacturers stick a mink coat on a compost or bury it to see if it would biodegrade? We haven't seen that. And there's a reason. So how does the fur industry do with their marketing? Well, the International Fur Federation claims that fur is natural. Now that's one thing that the FCC did not define. They never defined in their updated green guidelines what is natural. So of course, that's what they're claiming. Hong Kong Fur Federation claims that fur is a natural, responsible choice. Well, what does that mean? If I don't wear fur, am I not being responsible? Very confusing, because we know when you look at the tanneries that process fur and leather, they are using chemical and organic compounds that are detrimental to the environment and that are carcinogenic to humans. Now, we are not toxicologists, we're not chemistry majors. The FTC does not expect us to know about all these different compounds. But when the fur industry manufacturer says the product is natural, should that be allowed based on the process? Probably not. A lot of attention is given to the tanneries in places like China and India. Children as young as 8 and 10 years old are working with no protection on their little hands or feet. We see the same story time and time again in places like India and China. Outside of fur farms and tanneries, we see what that industry does to waters. And the World Health Organization itself has gone in and they've sent physicians, and they find that those who work near certain regions in India where those chemical toxins are dumped into the streets and the soil and water, they suffer from health consequences and they die before the age of 50. Now, it's not just the poor children in these tanneries that are having adverse consequences. The wealthier children that end up with the fur trim, they too are at risk, because investigations done in Italy, the Netherlands, Germany, the Czech Republic, testing the fur trim on children's fur as young as 24 months and younger, they find things like formaldehyde and exoxylates on fur trims on children's fashion. The Human Rights Watch report did a report in 2012 where they documented the human rights abuses in tanneries in India. Unregulated pollution of air, water, soil, health issues, child labor, a de facto policy of not implementing environmental laws, and yes, there's anecdotal evidence that cancer rates among the workers are higher. So what is the verdict? Is fur really natural? Or do we see some of the greenwashing sins that we talked about before, making us improve for fibbing? The Fur Council of Canada likes to claim that absolutely no endangered species are used. They say wearing fur helps to protect nature. Well, what does that mean? If I don't wear fur, am I being angry or harmful to nature? I don't understand. Here's the reality. For every single target animal caught, 2 non-target animals are also caught in those traps. The American Veterinary Medical Association estimates that up to 67% of total catch is non-target animals. The testimony of a former federal trapper to Congress says his records show that for every target animal trapped, 2 were also caught and had to be euthanized due to their injury. Study after study will show non-target animals are a huge victim with trapping. And it's not just wildlife, it's endangered species, like this trapped bald eagle that was rescued in 2012. We see this time and time again. And it's also companion animals. People's animals are getting caught by these traps in places where trapping is not even allowed, but we're finding it. And these traps are non-discriminate. It's not just animals, it's children and people too. There's been lawsuits brought by people injured. This little boy, 12 years old, was injured a couple years ago with one of these god-awful traps. So what's the verdict? What's the greenwashing sin? They say that they don't use endangered species, but wait, their process certainly catches a lot of endangered species. International Fur Federation says that fur is sustainable. The British Fur Trade Association says that fur is kind to the environment. The Danish Fur Breeders Association claims that fur farming is extremely respectful of the environment. The European Fur Breeders Association says that fur farming is a green agriculture activity. But what does green mean? We don't know. We don't understand. When we look at the rivers and the soils outside of fur farming tanneries and fur farming farms, this is what we see. The rivers run black. This is a place in China right outside of a area that does heavy fur processing. Because we know little animals produce a lot of waste, and when you do the math, it is not a pretty sight. We see this up in Nova Scotia, epicenter of the mink farming industry. The government says that the lakes are seriously degraded, primarily due to high phosphorus inputs from mink farming operations. Private foundations have studied those lakes in Canada. They conclude that they are under serious threat, where they're actually turning into blue-green algae that is not habitable for marine life. The EPA itself says that nutrient pollution is a leading cause of degradation of U.S. waters, and algae blooms endangers human health. And this is one of the lakes. Just 2 decades ago, people brought their families. They were swimming in these lakes. They were pristine. And now this is what the mink industry has done to those lakes. The International Fur Federation says that fur is one of the, quote, most environmentally friendly industries in the world. They say that to waste these beautiful furs would be disrespectful to the animals and the environment that created them. But wait, why are we wasting them when we're raising them on fur farms? 85% of fur-bearing animals slaughtered for their fur are raised on fur farms. So how are we wasting their skin if we don't raise them to begin with? This is what we see. This is 2 years ago. This is not photographs from the 70s. 2 years ago in Russia, people got in and were able to take some photographs. And this is the waste, the byproduct of the mink industry there. So I'm not here to show you a lot of disturbing photos. The photos we see are heartbreaking. What I do want to leave you with is there was an independent groundbreaking study done on the impact of the mink fur production. They did analyze mink fur versus cotton, polyester fabric, acrylic. They did a life assessment evaluation. They didn't just study a part of the process. They looked at what do you feed the minks and how do you dispose of their bodies. They looked at the impact of 18 different environmental issues, including climate change, water, mineral, fossil depletion, a very comprehensive study. And what did they find? They found that in 17 out of the 18 environmental impact studies, mink scored worse than the other textiles. Only in the case of water did fur score lower, and that's because cotton requires so much water. But they did not include a lot of the water that minks use for barn use, cleaning, for fur treatment, and so it probably was not as bad as it looked. Other conclusions, we know that carcinogens like chromium and formaldehyde used in the dressing and dyeing process of fur compromise the fur's biodegradability. So while it may be natural while the animal is wearing its fur, once you subject it to all those toxic chemicals, it no longer is biodegradable. So hopefully we're going to see what we saw in Europe. The European Fur Breeders Association put out an ad where they said it's eco-friendly to wear fur. That ad was banned by the Advertising Standards Authority. They said that they had no basis for claiming that it causes no environmental damage and no basis for claiming that the fur trade is eco-friendly. So, that is a lot to digest, and I thank you for hanging in there with me, and I will close. I want to leave you with the question that we started with. Is fur really green? Because as you can imagine, I believe that the answer to that question is no. But don't take my word for it. the World Health Organization and the doctors that are going into these tanneries and documenting the catastrophic health impact that those chemicals are having on children. Ask those in the lake communities in Nova Scotia, Canada, the epicenter of the meat farming industry. Ask residents who live along the rivers and the streams near fur farms and tanneries. And ask families who have lost beloved companion animals to trapping. And don't forget about the conservationists who see injured and killed wildlife every single day of the year, including endangered wildlife. Or the family of a little boy who himself was injured by one of those awful steel jaw traps that inflict so much prolonged suffering. And then ask yourself, is fur really green? Because as a green consumer, you are the final arbiter. You have the ultimate say as to whether or not fur is green. I am confident when you look at the studies and the reports and what governments have to say, you will conclude that the only thing green about fur are the profits that it generates and the waterways it pollutes. We know that the wheels of environmental justice turn painfully slow. But as guardians of this noble cause, you should not permit any industry, including the fur industry, to define your movement, to define who you are, or to define what you stand for. I want to leave you with a larger message regarding the green movement, and it's this. It's not that the fur industry is engaging in greenwashing like so many other companies and industries are doing. The impact is more profound. Until they hooked on to the environmental movement, the fur industry was in decline. You see, the green economy, as it was emerging several decades ago, so too was public awareness of the reprehensible, unspeakable, and indefensible cruelty involved with fur farming. Now, today's talk is not about the animal welfare aspects of fur farming, animals that in the wild cover vast distances of land, confined and actually condemned to live an entire life in barren wire cages. Cages that are completely void of anything natural and that denies every single natural instinct. The animal welfare aspects are important, but they are a topic for another discussion. Today's message is about the green movement, your green movement, and an industry that exploits it for profit. The larger message I want you to take home today is that the green movement is arguably the fur industry's most important lifeline. Without environmental claims that seek to normalize and legitimize, and yes, justify, the use of fur, claims that commit each and every greenwashing sin that we talked about, and ads that run counter to the FTC's updated green guidelines, the fur industry as we know it will go away. Because we know when all those high-definition, glossy greenwashing ads are finally taken down, and when we see all the eco-friendly labels finally removed, and when the fur is green slogans are finally silenced, we will see the fur industry for what it is and what it does, and that is an industry that is based solely on profit and that has done untold damage to the environment. Thank you.